Hey everyone! Today on the plastic canvas we're painting Sai Fon from Zombie 15. Hey everyone, Matt here from the plastic canvas and welcome to the first painting video on this channel. If you haven't checked it out yet, I do have a video up about sort of what this channel is, what to expect from it, and if this is sort of going to be for you, and sort of why I've actually started up this channel. If you've seen it and you're still sticking around, thank you very much for joining me. And yeah, this is the first video in which I'll be painting. This is a series of Zombie 15 minis, or the playable characters. And as you can see, I have actually already started some of them. They're all sort of underway. And that's because I started this channel after I actually painted these, or at least started painting them. I've sort of been kicking around in my head between sort of doing something kind of podcast related or putting up some YouTube content, and sort of ultimately decided on doing something for YouTube, because I sort of figure, well, at least if you guys can sort of see what I'm doing, that's a little bit better than just listening to me talk. So yeah, I'm painting all of them sort of alongside each other, so I'll just sort of be editing them so that it's sort of one video at a time, so you can see them from start to finish, and along the way just sort of talking about sort of what I'm doing and what sort of I'm sort of learning myself and sort of going along, because this is a beginner's journey into painting minis. So yeah, so sort of going to get into it. I will catch you up first on what I've done so far, just sort of so you know how I've gotten it to this point. So started with priming. Back before, well, even before I'd sort of first bought my my first set of paints, did a bit of research, watched some videos, read some different articles, and sort of people talking about primers. And yeah, sort of was a little unclear on exactly sort of what to get, because some people were saying, talking about the humidity of painting with spray primers. So, certain times of year that you can paint, need it to be certain temperatures, those sorts of things. And so I was just sort of not really too sure on exactly sort of how to go about that. But I did read from a few people about brush-on primers that they'd used, and that, you can sort of paint any time with a brush-on primer. So that was the first road that I went down. So I'm still using a brush-on primer, just because I'm sort of getting a little bit more use out of that, but I will definitely be going to a spray-on primer for the next sort of few minis that I'll be going with. So I'm going to get a black and a white, because as you can see with the black primer, painting a light color like yellow and the skin tone, it definitely takes a few coats for those brighter colors. So yeah, had I known a little bit more, would have probably primed with white for Sai Fon. But some of the other ones that have got those darker, like more dark blues and greens and those sorts of things, black primer sort of seems to be the way to go in from what I've done so far. So primed, then started inside out. So started with the lowest layer of the model, which pretty much any time for a person or anything similar, or anything like that, is going to be the skin. So painted her skin first, then I did a black coat for her shoes and her hair, and then her shirt that's under her singlet. Just grab her card that shows what she'll sort of end up looking like. So this is what we're going for. So just working up, from that lowest layer up to the top one. So her sleeve goes over her arm. So if you're so as you're sort of painting, you can sort of get away, or I find you can get away a little bit with like if some of that sleeve gets onto her skin in a spot that it probably shouldn't, it's less noticeable than if her skin is going over the sleeve, because if you think about one layer going over the top of another, it just sort of, it stands out more if a bottom layer is going over the top layer. So start at the bottom, work your way up. So start with the skin, then did her boots, because her pants go over the boots, then her sleeves. I've given a coat on her hair, which needs another coat, and then her yellow outfit over the top of that. So going to be doing another coat on her outfit, get a bit more on her hair, and then as you can see again from her card, there's some pinky purple sort of colours in her shoes, and up here on her sleeves, so we'll start working them in, and then also her gloves that she's got on. So going to get into some painting. So yeah, if you haven't watched that first video, the idea of this channel is not necessarily that I'm here to give advice, because I don't have years of experience under my belt, but just to sort of share what I'm learning along the way. So yeah, as I'm painting, I'll talk about what I'm doing, things that I've tried, things that I've kept on doing, maybe things that I've stopped doing to change. But yeah, so we'll just sort of jump in and out between sort of speeding it up so you can see what I'm doing. But then yeah, as I'm sort of sharing some things, I'll slow it back down. So let's get into painting up Sai Fon. So just quickly here, so I'm using Reaper paints. I bought just closing the lid, the sort of core starter paint set. There's a couple of different ones that you can get that come with some minis. They're like those learn to paint kits. I didn't pick up one of them just because from looking at the colours that came in them, I thought the set that I've gotten sort of had the best range of colours, like a good yellow, good blue, good green, and so on. Yep, so for Sai Fon, just using, spin it around that way, pale saffron. Definitely want to be thinning down your paints, obviously. But one of the good things I found about Reaper so far is that they are on the thinner side already. And then I mix in a bit of dry and retarder, which sort of thins it out a bit, but then obviously extends the workable life of the paint as well. So, and then just a little bit of water on the brush, just to help with that consistency. And then I sort of mix in the dry and retarder, just helps with the flow, and yeah, it means you're not against the clock. You get a bit of life out of your paint, and alongside with a wet palette as well. When I first started painting, I just had a plastic palette, which was fine. But obviously, finish painting for the night, then if you want to sort of keep those paints, then you've got to chuck some plastic wrap over it, or just sacrifice the paint and then put some more in the next day. But yeah, so went to a wet palette, just made one myself, just with a Tupperware container, which sort of has a good lid on it, and then just some. So I haven't gotten like a master series. Is that what it's called? Masters, something like that. I haven't gotten one of them yet. That's definitely on the list of things to pick up. But yeah, just a sponge in there, and yeah, and then just, well, depending on where you are in the world is what you'll be calling it, but just some baking paper in there, and then that just soaks up the water and then gradually releases it into the paint so that it doesn't dry out. And then when you're finished, good airtight lid, and then you can come back the next day and your paint's still workable, especially with that retarder in there. Just helps with that, and I found that really good for if I've got paints that if I'm mixing up a colour, I don't want to have to remix it and try and match it. That's been really good for that. So yeah, you can just jump straight back in and keep using that paint that you've mixed up. At the moment I try and use just colours straight from the bottle as much as possible. So as I'm sort of like building up my skills with highlighting and shading, I'm just finding if I use, like if I paint with pale saffron, the yellow that I'm using, I can lighten it and darken it a lot easier than if I mix it into sort of something else and then I need to try and lighten darken from there. But that's just for me. It's one of those things you want to try out for yourself. But yeah, I'll probably do a little video at some point showing my wet palette, just how I made it. But that's for another day. So just quickly on the brushes that I'm using, using Army Painter Wargamers. So that's my regiment one there, and then I have a few different sizes. So I've got a detail, insane detail there just at the moment for getting around the lines with her of her singlet there. And I think I've got, yeah, and then character. So a few different sizes there. These have been really good. The first ones that I got, I just bought some cheap brushes from an art store that was nearby. They did the job, you know, for my first few games that I painted. Yeah, no, they're rubbish. So definitely recommend picking yourself up some reasonable brushes, because you know it's one of those things that, you know, if your brush isn't holding its tip, or its shape, or it's just not holding paint well, you're just making things harder for yourself. You're working against yourself, or you're working against the brush really. So I got these pretty recently, and I really like them so far. Yeah, really hold the paint well, keep their shape well, and yeah, the triangular grip that they've got, don't know if I can get that angle there. Yeah, really nice to hang on to. And no, they don't come with the different colored ends. I just painted the ends. So purple for my insane detail, green for, oh, if I can get in there. What's this one? Detail. Then I was super clever. Red for regiment. Yep, didn't mean it, just a happy coincidence. And then what have I got? Which one haven't I shown? Blue for my character, just so that when they're sitting in the jar and they're all you know, bristles down, just see the color and then know which one to grab, because when they're all looking pretty much the same, hard to tell. All right, so just to add a little bit more onto what I was saying about the brushes before. Sorry, totally blanked on what I was going on with there. So been using the regiment for most of the painting so far. I've found it a really good size for you know, sort of minis of this size. And I mean, she's not. These are pretty small minis. You know, this is just grabbing this just off to the side. What's this? Half an ounce. I mean, you can see just from the size of that, like how big she is. So even the regiment for most base coating, it's been really good. Just using the insane detail here, just for going around at the top of her singlet there. Just trying to keep that line sort of as fine as possible. And then so just sort of catching up back on what I said a little earlier about the layering or the order of the parts of a mini that I paint. So by doing the lower layers first and then working up, if you then get a little bit from one layer on another, as you can see, I've done, a bit around, if we get that in focus, something like that. You can see that singlet sort of spread onto the top. It's then really easy to sort of to clean up. Just neaten those. Just to neaten those lines up. Obviously more to do, but just a quick little bit there. And just a quick little apology if I've been the first video, if I'm taking the mini out of the shot a little bit. I'll do my best to bring it back as quick as I can, and as each video goes I'll get a little bit better with that, so yeah. So I'm just going to let that coat dry now with the yellow. So I'm just going back now to her hair, just to give that another little coat, just those spots that just didn't quite get right, and just to darken it off again a little bit. So just going backwards and forwards just a little bit, the yellow and the black, just touching up. I'm not going for like much of a finish on these, just tabletop quality, if even that, because Zombie 15 played 15-minute real-time game very fast. These are not minis that are going to be sitting there for people to really be looking at. So just enough to sort of be getting the job done, but still trying to keep it sort of fairly neat. Looks like, just sort of as I'm looking back, just a couple of things going on there with the focus, so something to work on for some future videos, but it's all a work in progress. Alright, so with the wonderful magic of video, she's all dry, ready for her next bit of work on her yellow outfit. So you can see here we've got a little bit of brown at the front of the singlet, down each side of her pants, and then I'll be doing the pinky purple colour on her shoes and up on her singlet, and we'll get onto those gloves that she's wearing as well, so we'll be getting sort of pretty close to being done by the time we've done that. And then probably a wash, I reckon, a yellow wash on her outfit, just to pick at some of that detail. But yeah, we'll get this brown done. Got a black line to go along the bottom of her singlet there, gloves, and that pink colour on her boots. So we'll get onto that. So just something I've really found that's helped with getting those lines is, obviously you've got, the tip to the brush, but if you want to be painting a line like this. And what I'm actually a little bit lucky with on this model is that there is a slightly, you probably can't tell on the video, or you can just sort of tell there, it is slightly raised there on the edge of her pants where this brown line goes. If instead of using the tip, I've found if you roll it onto its side and just brush that down that edge, then you get that nice fine line. Whereas if I use just the tip, you go away so we can get sort of in focus. If you just use the tip, then it'll sort of spread out, and then you'll get a much thicker line instead of rolling on its side and just catching that raised edge. So definitely something that I found that's helped. So if you're doing like anytime I'm doing some edge highlighting, I just try and use just the edge, and it just gives a much finer line instead of using the tip when it's just going to roll down the edge of what you're trying to paint, and then just go where you don't want it. But yeah, so that's definitely worked for me. Just a thing I've sort of found has helped me a lot with painting a really, really thin line, like this black line that's just going around the bottom of a singlet. I think it is. Anyway, so I've gone to my insane detail brush for the line, but even with a brush this size, if I'm trying to do that thin line, I found rather than just like getting a bunch of paint and then trying to just do one line all the way around, I just get the paint in the tip and then do a bit of the line, then go back, get more paint in the tip, do a bit more of the line, and just keep repeating that. So rather than getting a big bit of paint and then trying to do the whole thing in one go, lots of sort of shorter lines just with paint in the tip. I found it keeps the tip nice and sharp, and then you just keep using the paint that's just right at the end there, which is exactly where you want it to be going, instead of then having to be pressing a bit harder to try and get the paint that's further up in the bristles, which is then going to obviously spread the bristles out. So that's just a thing that I found really helpful for those thin lines. Paint in the tip, paint a bit of a line, go back, get some more just in the tip, do that again, and just keep going back. Definitely useful for me. Okay, so I'm just going to do her gloves now. Good way I've sort of found to do this kind of material is I use, if I can describe it, so it's skeleton bone. It's the only sort of like off-whitey kind of colour that I've got. So skeleton bone. And then I use, so the washes that I've got are Citadels, and then I go with, and you'll see this later on, but just Seraphim Sepia, just over the top, and a bit watered down, then it just gives that sort of off-white kind of browny sort of look to it, because I'm not going to be painting it that sort of, like there are some parts there where it's really, really quite white, but I want it more of that, not brown, but just sort of off-white to a sort of tanny kind of colour. You'll see sort of later on how it ends up looking, but yeah, that's sort of how if I don't sort of stop to mention that, that's how I go about it. So just going really quickly, I mentioned before about when doing that black line, about how I just paint in the tip, do a bit, go back, get more. Again, when I'm doing something like this with the gloves, I do the same sort of thing, because I'm trying to, not really at this point, because I've already done the yellow, I don't want to have to go back and touch that up again, so I'm really trying to not touch it on there, and just trying to keep that line against the edge of her knuckles, sort of where her glove ends. Again, back on her card, you can sort of see how her glove is there. So again, I'm painting the tip, brush a bit, go back, get some more, rather than just getting a bunch in the bristles, and then then using all of it and having to sort of press a bit harder. Right, I'm just going to do a little skin wash now, just with Raycon Flesh Shade. Give me a second crack at that. Mainly because the detail in her face, because these minis are so small, there's only a tiny bit of detail in there, and just a little bit of shades. Just going to help bring that out. I don't think I'll actually do any skin highlighting, so because I do it on a face, I'll do it on her arms as well, just so that there's the same tone, and then I'm going to go in and paint her eyes, and then add those little pink bits to her boots, touring up about, possibly highlighting her hair just a little bit, maybe with a little dry brush, but we'll get to that. But anyway, yeah, so just a little one with Raycon, just to bring out those facial details just a little bit. So just while I'm here using it, so I bought for my washes just the Citadel set, which came with this brush wherever the camera is, just the shade one. It seems to do the job pretty well. The Raycon Flesh Shade is the one that I have found the easiest to kind of go overboard with. Some of the other ones, if you just hit a little bit too hard, they're a bit more forgiving, but with the Flesh Shade, really, if you hit it too hard, especially if you then try and highlight back up, it just makes them look like they've got some sort of hideous skin disease. And that might be fine for the zombies, but for the survivors, nah. So I always have a bit of water on my brush, just to keep it thin, so that if it's thin, you can't really, well, I find for myself, I can't really add too much if I've got it nice and thin, because then you can just do many thin layers, whereas if you hit a big thick layer, very easy to, sorry, out of shot there, very easy to go too hard. So yeah, thin layers, especially with Raycon, because very easy. You can see it's just pulling in her elbow a bit there. Very easy to go too hard with it, and because all I'm trying to do is just bring that detail out, I don't need to be doing any more than that. Okay, so I think we're sort of pretty much at the point now where the actual sort of like base coating is done to the point that I want for the, for the game. So with mentioned a little bit earlier, so Zombie 15-minute real-time game. These pieces are moving around quick. Everyone's pretty frantic, so these are not minis that are going to be sitting on the table for people to sort of really, really admire. So I think I'm sort of ready now for probably putting a wash on the yellow, and just a really, really thin down sepia wash on her gloves, just to give a bit of that sort of tanned kind of material look. And then I'm going to paint her eyes. I'll probably give a little highlight. Whoop, get it back in shot. Probably do a little highlight of her hair just to sort of bring that out a little bit, and then I think we're pretty good. We'll be painting the top of the base yellow, just because with the pace of the game, the base needs to be, the character needs to be identified really, really quickly. It helps that she's so yellow, but yeah, having that yellow base is just going to set that off a little bit more. So I'm going to do the wash now on all the yellow on her gloves. Paint the eyes, a little highlight on the hair, and then I think we're pretty good. So the wash for the yellow, what do we got? Cassandra yellow, Citadel wash. This I think I'm just going to paint straight from the pot. But yeah, that sepia that's going to go on her gloves will be washed down a little bit. This one I haven't really. More of a shake. This one I haven't really used yet, like straight on a mini. It went in as part of the mixture for the zombie skin, and yeah, I'll do a little video on how I painted those guys up because they're all done, so I can't actually paint them in front of you to show you how I did them, but I can put some pictures together. So this will be a little sort of test to see how this goes. But yeah, so this will just be straight from the pot. A little bit of water on the brush just so it's not too thick. But yeah, this will be a bit of a tester, so we'll see together how this goes. So just quickly, just on what the wash is actually doing there, I'm just going to bring in her card. Sort of just stop before actually sort of doing a wash on the whole thing. If you look at the colour of the yellow above her arms where I haven't done the wash yet, and then the colour below, it's now matching her actual card much better. Sorry, got quite a bit of glare going on there from that. Sort of block that a little bit. Yeah, so that's matching the colour there a lot better. So yeah, I find you can use a wash to bring out the detail to shade, and then you can sort of just to create those shadows, and then bring up the highlights. But then yeah, it's just also a good way to just to drop the color a little bit and just sort of darken the mini as a whole. So I'm pretty happy with how that's going. So I'll finish off the top of the singlet, and then I'll do the sepia on her gloves. Okay, so that's really happy with how that's looking. So that's painted straight from the bottle, the pot, whatever they're called. But with the sepia, it's way too brown for her gloves. So I'm just going to grab, if I can find it. There we are. So this is just my old plastic palette that I used. So I'm just going to mix a little into the corner there, and then just going to really thin it out. Just so that white is still sort of predominantly comes through on her gloves, but it just gives a bit of a tinge with the brown. When I first started using these washes, I used, anytime it was needed brown, just went to good old Agrax, which you see people using all of the time. But I find the more and more that I paint, the less I'm actually using Agrax, and the more that I'm leaning towards the sepia tone. I just find it just sort of has just not being quite so dark. It still adds that detail, still gives that shade that you want, but it doesn't dominate a mini like Agrax does. Agrax definitely has its place. Definitely still use it, but yeah, I just find I more and more lean towards sepia now, just because not everything needs to be super brown. All right, so you can see how thin on my nail that is there. That's really, really thin. It's mostly water, which is exactly what I want. So yeah, so we'll see how this goes. All right, so happy with that. So yeah, so it's just given it that tinge, but it hasn't like really turned to brown, so which is not the look that I was going for. So that's done the job. It might get another little go later on, but pretty happy with that. So I'm going to do her eyes now. I'm just going to show a good way that I found to do eyes, because from watching lots of videos, it is definitely a part of a mini that a lot of people really struggle with, and I certainly struggled with it when I first started. And then I saw a video. I will link it in the description below, because I do want to credit the person that I watched for picking this up. It was a Imperial Assault character, I think. But yeah, I'll put a link in there just to credit them, because it's just a good simple way of painting the eyes. So I'm just using my Insane Detail brush and just starting off with black. This is just the pure black that I've got, whatever it's called, solid black. Oh, it's really sort of starting to wash off. Anyway, yep, so solid black is what I'm using here. And then it's just in the eye socket, just painting a little. Oh, his eyes are really, really hard to see here. Just painting sort of painting the eye socket. And at this point, it does not matter if you use too much. Put it somewhere it shouldn't be, because the last part of doing these eyes will be to go back. Sure, in there. Yeah, will be to go back with the flesh color and just neaten it up. All right, so there we go. So we've just got two black sort of eye shaped bits there. That doesn't take long to dry, sorry. And then the next thing will be the white of the eyes. All right, there we are. Saved you guys a few seconds there of having to wait. So now it's just painting the whites of the eyes. Now all I'm trying to do here is basically leave just the top of each of those black bits that I painted. So they look super, super white at the moment, but now just back to the skin tone, and then it's just shape the eyes. So I'll be starting in the corner on the nose side, coming along and then rolling up into a point, just on the outside edge. and then don't know how well you guys can tell from that. Hopefully that shot there's okay. Yeah, so that's it, pretty simple. So yeah, so it's just that black due to like the sockets, the white of the eyes, the pupil, and then just shape with the skin tone, and it's as simple as that. And the effect is definitely good enough. I mean, if you going really close, inspect, sure, not absolutely 100% perfect, but more than good enough for tabletop quality. So she's looking pretty good now. Just going to put a little bit of highlighting on her hair. I don't think I'll worry about any other highlighting anywhere else. And then yeah, then the base, and then we're good. Right, so there's a bit of a cartoony look to the colouring of these characters. So if I just quickly look back on her card. Oops, here it goes back. Yeah, so it's quite like, quite an aggressive contrast there. So I won't be going for like, any sort of a super realistic looking highlight. So I've just mixed a little bit of grey into the black. And then yeah, just going to be just picking out the highlights of her hair. A bit tricky to get it to focus there. But yeah, so just picking out the raised bits, and that'll do. Okay, so just while that base is drying, I'm going to go in and still need another coat on there because we're doing the yellow over black. Just with the hair, even though I do have that sort of strong contrast that I'm trying to go for, matching the card, I am just going to put a little Nuln oil over the top, just to bring it down a little bit. Yeah, just to smooth it out a little bit. Probably went a little bit light with the grey, even though I am going for that contrast that's on her card. But I just sort of want to see how it looks. Yeah, definitely happier with how that's looking. It's just not quite so strong. So I think she's at the point now. There's a couple little touch-ups just on her feet once the base is done, but yeah, she's pretty much at the point now where I just need to wait for that base to dry really well. So I'm going to put another coat on there, which should hopefully be the last coat that will be needed on there. And then just those quick little touch-ups on her boots, and then she will be finished. So we're just going to leave that for a little while now, and then I'll come back a bit later on and finish her off. Alright, so back to paint, hopefully the last coat on her base. Bit of a background change. I was having a bit of an issue with the focus. If I held it sort of really low, like close to the board, it was alright, but anyway, sort of up, getting a bit closer to the camera, it really started to, keep focusing on the background. So I've just put this black background down, and it seems to be confusing the camera a little bit less. So hopefully the finish of the video is a bit better, and then the future ones I'll keep this if it looks better. But yeah, hopefully the last coat. And I did realise while jumping between some of the minis that I still need to paint some blood on her. So that'll be, normally I try and finish with the base, that's the last thing that I do, but it looks like I'll be finishing off with the blood, which is not a bad way to finish, because it is a bit of fun splattering some blood on. Alright, so still needs, looks like at least another coat. I don't think I'll do anything more on it in the next probably couple of hours, just to let it really sort of dry properly. So fingers crossed one more, but we can go ahead with a bit of blood. You can see it's sort of there, sort of fairly sparingly, so we'll try and sort of mimic that a bit. First time I painted blood, which was on some of the zombies, I just used red, so just the heraldic red here. When it went on, it looked really cool, but unfortunately after it dried, it looked like that all just had a fight with some red paint, and it just, like, it still had the right effect on the table, still looks cool, but yeah, if you kind of like inspect it closely, doesn't really hold up. So then I had a go at mixing some brown in with it, and it just kind of killed that brightness of the red, because obviously, you know, if these zombies are dead or if they've been feeding on someone, that blood's not going to have that sort of vibrancy that it does with someone that's still alive. So yeah, just dulled it down a bit, but still had a definite red tinge to it. So I'm just quickly mixing just a little bit of brown there, and yeah, the brushes that I started off with, this is one of the ones that I started with. It's did the job for the first few minis, but yeah, it doesn't really hold up now. So the way that I've been painting blood so far is I just sort of flare out the tip, and then kind of just dab it into the paint, and then, so if you imagine like a blood splatter, it's, first of all, there's no real sort of organization to it. I mean, I guess there's like a pattern to it, but then also it's, well, splattered. And so if, yeah, fine by spreading the bristles, and yeah, kind of doing a stippling, that might be what it's called. Just sort of gets a pretty cool effect without, too much work. So just on my paper towel off to the side, just getting off sort of most of the paint, so that it's just sort of really just what's on the tip that's left. So it's kind of like dry brushing, but a bit different. So we'll see how we go. So just kind of that sort of a thing. And obviously the amount of paint that's on your brush can kind of change the effect of how recently it looks like the blood was on there. So if there's just a little bit on there, it makes it look like it's sort of been there for a bit and has sort of dried. Whereas if you then go and get a little bit more, even a little bit more than that. So if I just sort of try a bit, maybe up like here, spread it around a bit. There, if you sort of look at the difference there, more paint there, less paint down here, so that looks more recent, whereas that's a bit more sort of dried. So yeah, so pretty simple way of getting some blood on there. I'm sure she's been fighting, she's probably going to have a little bit up around her hands. No, if that'll sort of focus, getting a bit closer. No, not going to play. They're a little bit better. But yeah, so pretty simple way of just getting a Getting a bit of blood going on there. Yeah, so I found putting the blood on there is very, very easy to go overboard with. It's one of those traps you can kind of fall in, well, at least I found for myself, one of those traps that I can fall into, where you forget about the scale, because obviously, you know, these are, you know, quite small. If you imagine a full-size person, like if you sort of take her up to full size, you know, she's got quite a bit of blood on her there. It can be very easy to just sort of go crazy with it and just put it everywhere, and then you sort of you really lose the effect of it, because you just kind of want it there sparingly just to give the effect. Yeah, I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm going to call her, other than her base, I'm going to call her done. Alright, there we go. So I've gone back and done a touch up around her boots. This is where I got some of that yellow paint from the base onto her boots, and I reckon we're going to call her done. There we go. I reckon she's looking pretty good. So yeah, I've sort of described the type of game that this is. It's really, really fast paced. These minis aren't on the table for too long, and everyone's way too frantic to be looking at them closely. So this standard of painting is absolutely fine for this type of a game. Will absolutely do the job. If it was a sort of game where these minis would be on the table for longer, people would be looking at them more. I'd do a bit of highlighting, things like that, especially on her skin, probably on a bit of her clothing as well, sort of up the top of her singlet and that, where a little bit more light's going to be catching. But for this, really, really happy with that. Come up pretty well. So that is the end of my first video on this channel, where I've been painting. So if you've hung around, thank you so much for spending some time checking out one of my videos. If you enjoyed watching it, or if you got something out of it, please give it a like and a subscribe. That'll help me out a lot. And yeah, feel free to put a comment down below if there's a bit of feedback on the video, if there were things that you liked, things that you think could be improved on. Yeah, this is the first one, so I'm looking for feedback on ways that I can sort of make it as good as possible. So I know during the video I sort of stopped and started a bit with sort of talking a bit about what I was doing and reasons why I was doing things the way that I was, things over my last few months of painting that I've picked up along the way. Most videos won't have as much talking as what this has, because being the first video, there was quite a few things that everything that I was talking about for the first time. So future videos, you know, I won't necessarily be talking about those things as much. So yeah, so if you found that there was too much talking, please still do stick around and check out some of the other ones, because there'll be a bit less of that. But if you did like the amount that I stopped and shared some things that I've picked up along the way, please let me know in the comments below, and I'll make sure that I keep sharing what I'm learning and what I'm trying, what I'm keeping on doing, what I'm not keeping on doing, because I'm definitely making mistakes along the way and thinking, probably shouldn't have done that. So yeah, but yeah, please give a like and a subscribe. Please stick around, and yeah, I really appreciate the time, and I hope you've gotten something out of this. So yeah, happy painting, and we'll see you next time.